All right, so today we're going to do a podcast on a much needed topic for everybody. And I have an expert here who has done hundreds and hundreds of rehabs, and it's going to be all about estimating repair costs. How do you do this the right way? Because a lot of people make the big mistake of not understanding how much construction is going to cost, and their entire project takes a shit. So, Jeremiah, thanks so much for coming on today and covering this really important topic.
Thanks, buddy, for having me. I'm happy to be on.
Awesome. So before we get into the details, this has been something you've been doing since 2015, full time, basically rehabbing everything. So you got a lot of experience. You're doing it in New York, which is obviously one of the tougher places to do it in. So Jeremiah is the best guy I could find to educate us on this topic. So let's just kind of walk through, like, what do you do when you guys are going and investing in properties? How do you do your repair? Like, what is your kind of first step that you do or your team does at this point?
Well, first and foremost, right, is I'm always trying to buy at a big enough spread that allows for leeway. Okay. So even if there's things that pop up that I don't see or I miss something, because we're making a lot of offers and we're, obviously can't spend a ton of time underwriting you because, as you know, we're getting only a small portion of what we see actually under contract. And so we have to look at a lot of deals in order to make that work. So I always want to make sure there's a big spread. Now, over time, I've developed, the ability to look just from photos and videos at roughly what things will cost. That, coupled with a big spread, allows me to, for the most part, consistently make money. There'll be times, usually when we lose money, it's a combination of we completely just misinterpreted or misread what the property needed. It didn't sell for as much, whatever the case is. There's just, and obviously because of that, it took longer. And so we burned through holding costs. That's usually when we lose money. Now, in situations where I don't personally go out anymore and see the houses, I get photos and videos, but you have to start obviously from the very beginning and look at the house itself, right? So people overlook the demo element. So demo can range depending on how big of a rehab you're doing. You could be spending quite a bit on just contents. I mean, content removal alone, dumpsters, a 30-yard dumpster is $800 to $900, especially if they're overweight. So you're now looking at, a potential cost just to remove contents of $3-4 grand. Then you're talking about the initial demo of pool, of bathrooms, pool removal, kitchen, siding. So demo can easily be $8,000 to $9,000, right? That can easily be that cost. So you start off with that. Now you're looking at siding, right? So for the most part, what has allowed us to be consistent is we typically go for the same style house, same size house. So I know that on our typical rehab, right, a siding job is going to cost $10,000.
That's to do the siding on a normal house in a regular
house, $10,000 to $11,000. It's a little bit bigger. If we're using cedar impression, that number can go up to 13 or 14. Roof on average is $8,000 to $10,000. But again, not all being equal. You rip off the roof, you have to replace plywood. There's a cost involved in that. That could easily add $1,000 if you have to, to $2,000. You've got to repair all the plywood. These are things that you don't see. So obviously, we've got roof, we've got siding, we've got demo. I know that windows cost anywhere from, depending on how many windows, $6,000 to $8,000. Okay,
that's with that's if you're doing all the windows on the full house. If you're repairing everything,
you know what I mean? Could be a little less. Could be a little less if it's a smaller house. Now understand, I'm looking at this because I've done the same house so many different times. And I can look at something. I can probably say I can look at it within 15 seconds, get within about 10%. Okay. I remember the book that I read on estimating rehab courses from Jay Scott.
Yeah, that's a good book.
He was, somebody that, had a big impact on me. And I remember him saying, my goal, I could be misquoting this, is to be able to estimate within 15 seconds, within 10% of what the rehab cost. And I'm like, that's crazy. But eventually, you get there. It
Yeah.
just happens, right? It's just like you don't know how or when. It just one day it just kind of clicks. So I want to just kind of keep people have that in mind that in the beginning, you want to break it down on a spreadsheet. Maybe it doesn't take you 30 seconds. Maybe it takes you 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And again, there's not a whole lot of difference if between 30 seconds and 5 minutes if you're looking at a couple of houses. When you start to do high volume and you got all this other stuff, yeah, actually that time makes a big difference. But I would say, you're like I said, we're going back to the cost of the windows. Now you got windows, you got siding, you got roof, you got demo, and you have gutters, which you add on like about another 1,200 for. All right, so that's that element. Now, landscaping is an open-ended thing. Depending on how much junk, it could be a $2,000 landscape. Depending on how big the property is, it could be a $5,000 to $10,000. Depending on how much there's on there. We incorporate landscaping and driveway. Anything on the outside is sort of one big budget. You know what I mean? That number can vary significantly, but understand that if you're just a small piece of property and you're doing a mild cleanup, you're still going to be in for 2,000. If you're doing a bigger piece of property and you got to remove a lot of junk and you got to do a driveway and everything like that, you could be closer to 15. So
yeah, and that adds up. And we haven't even walked in the house and started doing the inside. So like rule of thumb, 10 to 15 for siding, right? Is that what you said? 10 to 15. We got 8 to 12 for a roof, depending on, how big the house is, depending on how much you have to rip the layers off. We're looking at 6 to 8 for windows, roughly, right? That's everything brand new, removing, replacing.
Now, and we're talking about stock windows, like an American Craftsman, we're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
talking
normal
about,
windows.
Anderson or anything like that. Good windows, but, not something that would be in a higher end home.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. Because this is where people really, they just don't know. Like they're thinking the windows are going to be $3,000 and then they're $7,000 and all of a sudden their whole budget gets skewed.
On average, it's about 400 and change for, every window that's installed. You know what I mean? So, you do the math. You know what I mean? You've got, 20 windows. There you go.
That's it. Simple math.
Sliding glass door. If you have a sliding glass door, $1,200 to $1,300.
Just did that.
A 6-panel light. A 6-panel front door, Craftsman style door, $700 to $800. Installed. All right, so now we've got our exterior. I can tell you that electric, plumbing, assuming you don't have to do a boiler, and AC is usually together, if you're doing a full redo, about $30,000.
Is that upgrading the electric? Like
it would be upgrading the electric, switches, outlets, not rewiring the whole house.
No, just the panel. Like
the panel. Yeah. You're about $10,000 for that. You're about $10,000 for plumbing. You know what I mean? New baseboards. But that number could be a little less. But if you're in for a boiler, you're adding another $5,000 to that.
When you say plumbing, are you talking about doing new PEX piping? Like what
PEX piping, new baseboard, shower bodies, water supplies for your sink, appliance connections, water supply for your vanities, toilets, etc.
The whole hookup, yeah, because that's a lot of the houses are just so shot you can't really save
you know what I mean?
Screw it up. Yeah. Okay, so plumbing, electric. What about like when a lot of times what I'll do is usually like the electric is all jacked up, so like there's like electric in all the rooms. Like actually like in this place, for example, like I have a light up here, but I don't have hi-hat lighting. I like to put hi-hat lighting in, so I like the electrician to go in and drill 3 to 4
Usually that 10,000 will get you a good amount of hi-hats. Not everywhere, you know what I mean? Yeah. But a good amount of, again, we're talking about a 14 to 1,800 square foot home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you're probably adding, amongst the bedrooms, 12 to 15 hi-hats, and then in the common areas, probably another 10, so on average, that's, what it would be.
And that makes a big difference too, because when you have a nice new house and you have the hi-hat lighting, you could just turn the switch on versus having to get lamps and ceiling fans. It really makes the house much more appealing to people because, not a lot of people want to just put lamps in.
And listen, I also want to, a lot of people watch your podcast and they're from different parts of the country. And so levels of finishes vary. If you're looking at all these rehabs and they're selling and they're just putting, single fixtures in, with the basic builder grade. All right. I mean, if that's what works and that's what people are okay with, I know in my market where houses, our median prices, tend to be, 550 to 7, somewhere in that range, which used to be on the expensive side. Now it's like not that expensive, but still people are paying that amount of money. They're going to expect, hi-hats, you know what I mean? They're going to expect quartz countertop, you know what I mean? They're going to expect, bigger molding. And, it's just, even if that's, an entry level price, there's still a certain level of expectation.
100%. No, and that's really market specific too. If you're doing this in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, your buyer is not expecting, the Taj Mahal. But if you're in,
yeah, but you want it to be good, safe, clean, but you may not have to put 20 hi-hats. You may not have to put any,
100%. Let's cover the two things that really sell houses, and it's kitchens and bathrooms. So what are you, and I'll just tell you what I normally have for numbers, and also we'll like to see what yours are because we're basically in the same area. Normally, if we're doing a full kitchen, like I'm talking everything goes and then everything comes in brand new, anywhere from 8 to 14 grand, depending on how big the kitchen is. It depends. And what type of stuff I'm putting in.
I would say 14 is on average. With appliances, it could go up a little bit if the kitchen is bigger. Could be closer to 12. It's a little smaller. Again, your appliance cost is fixed. You might have a little bit more cost on countertop material, and you might have a little bit more cost on some cabinets. That's kind of where the variable is, but you're still going to do the same kind of appliances. You know what I mean? So at the end of it, it doesn't vary too much for us. If you start adding waterfalls and a significant amount more cabinets and upgrading the appliances, that number can get up there.
Are you putting in builder grade cabinets or slow close fancy cabinets?
I mean, they're builder grade, I would say, but they're not like what you'd expect. I mean, it's soft close, it's solid plywood, you know what I mean? It's just, what we define as builder grade might be considered an upgrade for other places. You know what I mean?
Okay. But you're putting in the slow close quality cabinets that people.
Yeah. They're cabinets that I wouldn't have a problem putting in my own house.
Okay, that's fair. And are they normally white colored? Normally?
White color, white shaker, yeah. Everybody thought, white shaker's been around now and it's not going away. Everyone thought it was going, at some point it would vary. I remember people thought that the green shaker cabinets were going to actually push away the white shaker, but it just never materialized,
No, the white just looks good with everything, especially with a well-lit house. When you have the hi-hats, everything starts to sync together, and and the quartz countertops, that's a nugget, by the way, because if you can just put the quartz in alone, that just makes the property look that certain way. Oh, this is a new renovated property,
And you have to bear in mind, it's a significant cost difference from one to the other, but if you're not dealing with a ton of square footage, remember, they bill by the square footage. So if it's not that much more square footage, it's not going to really cost you that much more. We put like nice, good flooring in on our bathroom tiles, and I'll spend a little bit more there. There's not that much tile. You stay in the bathroom, 8x5, which is 40, but really after the way you take the tub, you know what I mean? You're talking about a little over 30 square feet. So I'm like, all right, well, I could do tile that's $3 or $4 a square foot, or I could do 10, 11. It's costing me a couple $100, but it makes the bathroom.
Makes it look so much better. Exactly.
It's so much better. So it's when you're not dealing with a big square footage number, it doesn't matter,
100%. And you actually just opened up a can of worms for the next part of the show. This is where actually I hit you up a couple months ago, and I said, hey, this flooring quote's kind of giving me a little like toss up, because I was like, I didn't think it was going to be that high, because normally it's not. So what do you normally see? Like if we're putting in, let's just make this as simple as possible, LVP flooring in a normal house, a cape, a ranch, whatever. What do you normally see in the total cost? If you got to rip up the carpet, you got the subfloor, and you're putting in LVP flooring, generally speaking, what are you looking at on a cost per square foot basis?
Typically about $6 a square foot.
Everything. That's materials and labor.
Yeah, typically $6 a square foot is what we're seeing, because it's like 3 and change plus labor, but that could add up quick.
Well, if you got a 2,500 square foot house, I'll just do the math. I mean, that's that's 15 grand off the shot, right? If that's a 25, and a lot of buy levels by me are that big,
Yeah.
right? That's not that unnormal. You got 1250 up front, 1250 down
Mhm.
bottom. That could be 15 grand. And if somebody's thinking they're
I know.
5
That could
or
be a
7,
lot.
hey Rocco, what's going on?
Oh yeah, Rocco to enter the picture, you know?
Yeah. If you ever want to send him to San Diego, I'll buy
Yeah,
the.
you're welcome to watch him once in a while.
Yeah.
So
I've seen him do some damage in your basement on a side note.
well, you should have seen what he did yesterday. He had a little bit of an upset stomach. I'll just leave it at that, you know.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Dog not included in the rehab package. So we got about $6 a square foot for floors. Are you normally just putting an LVP? Is that if you can't finish?
Yeah, because I mean, keep in mind, like our houses, let's just say, are 1,600 square feet. So you're over 10 grand. Because I mean, good flooring. I'll be quite frank. There was a flooring a couple of years ago that I really loved. It was cheap. It was like, I don't know, $1.80 a square foot. I loved it. Put it in my office, or my wife's office, I should say. It's shot. It's shot. So
Is
a
it
lot of this
LVP?
flooring looks good, looks cheap, but you don't want to be the guy known. And I hate that it's in some of our houses as, oh yeah, you put down this cheap floor and now it's all coming up. So, $3 to $4 a square foot gets you something. Like I have something in my basement, which you've seen. It's $3 to $4 a square foot. I put that down in 2014, 9 years later. It's held up really well. You know what I mean? It's held up really well. So that, I feel like that's money well spent. That's the kind of floor you want to put in. Something that, is going to last 10 to 15 years.
Is the cheap floor laminate? Is that why it's getting ripped up? It looks like it's
Yeah, it's a
LVP,
laminate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a laminate,
Yeah. I've made that mistake. I've done a few properties where the laminate and the LVP looked exactly the same to the naked eye, but then a year and a half later, it's like, this is a total piece of shit. And then you gotta, the tenant or the new buyer is kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah, you don't want that, but I would say, a flooring at 10,000 for flooring is not out of the realm of possibilities, especially, let's just say a house that, you have, if, it's 1,600 square feet, you know what I mean? You do the math. It adds up quick. I mean, again, the cost of the floor, the cost of the padding, the labor to put it down, you know what I mean? I could be a little bit on the high side, but again, I'm accounting for the fact that nothing's cheap anymore. And what I'm quoting is 3. I'm going off of numbers a couple of months ago, could really be like 350. You know what I mean?
Yeah, keeps going up for sure. So we got flooring covered now. So let's get into now the bathrooms, because at least in our area, like if I'm doing like a rental property rehab, which we just did one recently, I'm putting in a tub base, like a plastic tub piece. I'm not tiling it because tile can get fucked up with tenants sometimes. So I'm putting in like a tub piece. I'm putting in a brand new toilet. I'm putting in a plain Jane vanity, and we're painting it. And the LVP floor is usually just going to be in the bathroom too. This is for
I think for a rental, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think, what you do in a rental, because there's so much turnover, I think that's acceptable. I don't, however, think you can do that in the rehab in the areas that we operate.
Yeah. Well, if you're selling above 450, 500, I agree. You have to tile it and do tile in the bathroom and make it. So I'm normally seeing my bathrooms are anywhere from, I know it's a pretty big variance, like anywhere from 4,500 to 6,500, like all in.
Yeah. Again, the numbers are probably a little bit higher. I would say 7 or 9 in our case.
Okay, 7. But
now,
you're
understand
really high end stuff.
Well, our vanities are 400 or 500. Again, we're accounting for the good tile work, good end products. We're not putting Kohler toilets in, but we're not putting Glacier Bay in either. Maybe we do an American Standard. That's on average. I'm not saying that might be a little bit low. Understand, everybody prices things differently, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the plumbing, a contractor may say, well, the cost of doing the plumbing is X, right? But they may be billing the bathroom as a separate cost, all in with that plumbing. So depending on how they do it, like I have guys, and some of their in-house guys will handle the bathrooms, and that's incorporated in their price, whereas somebody else, he's going to bring his plumber in to kind of do everything. His bathroom cost might seem less, but everybody has their own way of doing things. But his bathroom costs seem less only because he's factored in the total plumbing for the house, which includes those areas.
Yeah, and it could be two separate line items versus just one total thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, the bathroom. I mean, another thing too with the bathrooms, you got to make sure those bathrooms look good. I mean, nobody wants to buy a house with like a shitty bathroom. It just kind of like a. It's just kind of like, especially if you like do a really good house and then the bathroom you didn't redo and like got like old toilets in there. It just really like makes buyers kind of, walk the other way sometimes, depending
Yeah.
on the price of the house. So let's cover paint. This is something that is fairly straightforward, but normally a paint job, we're looking at like, I mean, what are you seeing? Like 350 a square foot to paint usually, $4 a square foot?
Yeah, four. You know what I mean? I think that's fair. $4 a square foot. And paint's going up.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of that's in labor to do it right. And, the even lines, but yeah, I would say that's fair.
$4 a foot. So if you got a 1,500 square foot house, I mean, we'll just do the math here. So 4 times 1,500,
6,400.
but yeah, 6 grand. Yeah, 6 grand. I mean, that's
60, 1,600 square foot house. Yeah, 6,400.
yeah. So that's the paint. So we got most of the inside part of the house done at this point. Oh, sheetrock. What about sheetrock? What do you kind of do for that?
Sheetrock for a house, again, if you're doing a whole house, could be 7 to 11 grand.
Mm-hmm. That's if you got to gut the house, obviously. That's if you're taking the house inside out.
Yeah, I mean, assuming the demo's been done and the walls are clear and the studs are clear and nails and they come in, about what it is.
Yeah, and then you got to paint the sheetrock. So this stuff adds up. You really gotta. This is why I really love the wholesale model, which is when we can go in and buy the houses that are not totally dilapidated and just new bathroom, new countertop. Like that is like my favorite because we can save on a lot of the costs. Instead of having to gut a house and rebuild everything from the inside out. So we got most of the inside covered. So let's kind of end, the SOW on stuff that really scares people. Well, septic, oil tanks. This is a big deal in our area. So yeah.
Before, I just wanted to say, on average too, don't forget about trim, right? Your base molding and your doors. That could be anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000. You know what I mean? So just people have to understand that that cost of it. But going into, so obviously a new septic system could cost you anywhere from 7 to upwards of 20, depending if you've got to put a septic in that's what they call now these IA compliant systems. They could go really, really crazy. Again, that's more for new builds. If you're expanding, a basic septic, not changing anything about the house, and you're just changing what's there, you're looking at 8,000 to 11,000 for septic. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a ton of well water, but I could tell you, like, a brand new well will be at least 10,000, if not more.
That's if you got to insert it, like rip the old one out, put a new one in, start to finish, about 10 grand. Yeah.
So you get the well, right? You have septic. Obviously, framing repairs. We have a lot of termite issues, right? So like, we notice that there's been termite activity, we might put a termite baiting system in, which is going to cost us, $600-700 for a baiting system that'll deal with the termite issue, but then you got to deal with the damage. However much that could be. That could be $1,000 fix. It could be a $6,000 fix if you're, got to replace the main beam. Because do you want to know what scares people?
Yeah, that scares the shit out of. Are you putting termite tents over the properties or no?
No, it's a baiting system.
Oh, okay.
So it's just these little systems. It's a black cylinder, drops into the ground, probably 6 to 7 inches in diameter, and they put them around. And basically, what happens with a termite baiting system is the termites are attracted to the food. The food is poisoned. They eat it. They bring it back to the colony to share with the rest of the termites. They also eat it. I think this is how it works. And basically, it kills the colony.
Got it. So it was kind of, remember last year I told you about my German cockroach house. Remember that one? Similar. We did that inside though, and that got
out of there. Termites we have a big issue with, and so the termite treatment isn't bad, but what the termites have done, in their time being there, that's the more significant issue. So that'll scare people. Septic will definitely scare people.
Yeah.
I would say those are really your two biggest issues.
Buried oil tanks. That scares me.
Oil tanks don't scare people as much. If we have an underground oil tank here in New York, you just simply get an abandonment certificate, which can cost you $1,000 to do. If you've got to abandon and then put the tank above ground, you're looking more like 3 for
Yeah.
total to abandon and replace. But that doesn't necessarily, sometimes you'll have an above ground oil tank, that's fine, but
Oh,
then
that's
they come across an in-ground one that was used, in the past, and then at that point you have to simply, just get your abandonment certificate.
Yeah, New Jersey is the opposite. New Jersey, I had 2 of them one time, and that was it's the state gets involved, and it's a whole like different process. So like in New Jersey, if you're listening to this and you're in New Jersey, especially North Jersey, it can be a problem with the oil tanks because there's a lot of
Yeah,
them there. So they have a different process. New York, they're there, but there's not as many of them. We had a
yeah.
property that I actually wholesaled, but there was 2 leaking underground oil tanks. And it was really, and like one of them was leaking into the house. So it was like, it was
That's a
a real,
problem.
yeah, the seller had to leave like 20 grand in escrow. So
Oh yeah.
it was bad. New York, I mean, honestly, in New York, you can do the 2 a.m. night shift if you're really feeling crazy. But you didn't hear that from me.
Yeah, but usually people find an abandoned oil tank. It's not an end of the world, but everyone likes to cover their bases. You get an abandonment certificate, and that's it.
Done deal. Yeah, New York's actually easy for that. And even too in New York, I realized like when you have open COs and stuff, like you can still close and do the work afterwards. In New Jersey, sometimes unless it's like a foreclosure and the seller's distressed, you can't even transact the property until the C of O is closed. In New York, they
Oh
don't care.
wow.
You can just close and then you just have to deal with it afterwards. That's another thing, actually. I guess we'll end with this. So now let's get into, I mean, you do new builds as well. So that's obviously going to require brand new permits. How do you approach permits when you have to get them? Like, what do you like with open COs like that? That's another thing that really throws off new flippers is they don't know. They've never even know what a CO is, and
Right.
all of a sudden they have this violation and they have to fix it. So, what do you guys kind of normally look for? Like, do you get a permit for everything? Are you just kind of dealing with? Because I'm sure you bought a lot of houses with open COs, and you have to kind of work them out.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a house right now that we just put on the market yesterday. It's got all sorts of open permits, right? Our final is scheduled for next week, but even the towns are just so delayed and screwed up that even if we pass our final inspection, it could be a while before we actually, we get the CO. Nice thing about New York is that we can still close, hold money in escrow. It certainly looks a lot better if everything's passed, because then you're like, all right, we're just waiting for the final paperwork. It's not a home run that you get the CO because they could say, oh, well, we missed this or we missed this, but everything passes the final. It looks a lot better. But we have that right now. I mean, we bought that house at the price that it was at because somebody didn't want to deal with closing everything out. So it's like, okay, we'll deal with it. And we might have to deal with it even after, we sell it, which is what will likely happen.
Yeah.
So that's the thing there. We can buy houses with, extensions and legal extensions. If there's no open violations or open permits and there's no COs for those respective extensions, I would say first floor extensions, garage conversions, basements, finished basements, those aren't as much of an issue. Where it becomes an issue is second story, like dormers without permits.
Oh my!
That
How does
could
someone
scare
even do
people.
that without getting a permit? It's so
Oh, it
obvious.
happens all the time. Happens all the
Crazy.
time. So second story, extensions where they added a whole new floor. If it's got an open permit, I would actually say in some ways it's better because at least it was approved. Like the house we just listed has that. But they granted the permit, which means the work was approved. If you don't have a CO and you're doing some kind of crazy big extension, that could scare people. First floor extensions don't scare people as much, but second floor ones without COs do.
Yeah, that's a major problem.
So I think that's a bigger issue. Obviously, new construction is a whole other animal. Anything that you get that's new construction, be prepared for it to take at least a year before you get permits. By the time you go through everything, Department of Health and planning and highway and everything, and you get everything in, it could be a long, long time.
So you could wait a year to even break ground, basically.
Yeah.
Depends on where you are, because I know with that Hampton house, I mean that took a while, right, to break
Yeah,
ground.
I mean, bought that in December of 2021 and August of 2022, but it had an existing house on it. So that's what helped. But, raw land to develop is a whole other animal. You know what I mean? And so you
Yeah.
got to think about that. But I mean, that one, wasn't terrible, but by no means great either.
Yeah, and that I mean, when you buy land too, like you're just sitting on something that's a liability until you sell it or rent it or refi it. So really you have to really understand that there's going to be a substantial capital
Yeah.
investment with not a lot of, you're not going to turn your money that fast. So you really gotta, be aware of that. And you need to understand that, it's going to take, especially in New York, with the way that things happen, it's difficult to work there. And that's why I think there's a little bit more opportunity there. So in summary, as we start to wrap this show up here, what is your advice for people? Because you see a lot of people online, they're like, oh yeah, if it's a big rehab, it's $65 per square foot. And then they just kind of use that. Like, what are
I
your
don't
thoughts?
know how anybody could actually use that number. I think it varies from house to house so much. I think you have to break it down on a line item basis. I think,
Yeah.
you could have, your demo, your roof, your siding, your windows, kitchen, bathroom, paint, floor, trim, landscaping, right? So you got your big 10 there, right? And then you could have separate line items, oil tank, well, septic, right? At least think of that, and you're gonna have to look at it as a line item for each, and you
That's
have
much
to add
better.
it up, which is what I've seen you do when we've gone over the rehab for your jobs, and then maybe add a little contingency. I don't necessarily have a contingency. I just look at my numbers and I say, okay, at this rehab, selling at this price, will it work? And if it doesn't, I've seen enough stuff go sideways to know how much it'll go sideways by. Will I still make money? And chances are I will. And again, that's not always correct. That's not always right. But, and I'm not saying a couple of times I wish I had back. But if you extrapolate, if you do that enough over the course of a lot of rehabs, you're almost always going to come out ahead. And a few times that you're not, you're going to say, well, I followed the same methodology across 20, 30, 50, 100 houses. I made money. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so
100%.
you have to start thinking sort of big picture, and playing the long game and realize that like a one-off rehab, yeah, if you're one of those guys that just does that, be super detailed because you may not have, it may go bad and you may not have that other rehab to balance it out. In my case, we're looking at it on a more on at scale, and we're implementing this methodology, and we're basically using it at the same time, many times over.
Yeah, and that's what I do now. I just look at like the last rehab we did. Okay, this is what it costs. Oh, this house is a little bit bigger. Let's make some adjustments. And there,
After a while, you just know, right? Like
yeah,
you're just looking, it's like I've been there, I've done that, and I might say 90, and the contractor says, sorry, it's more like 100. It's like, okay, well, our spread was big enough, and
you
maybe
can make
our profit goes down from 60 to 50.
Yeah, and I just keep track of it on a simple Google sheet. I don't have some fancy rehab calculator that's out there. I just use a Google sheet line by line. I mean, you've seen them. I've shared them with you. I mean, it's just simple, just line by line. That's it. Add it up. I usually do a 10 to 12% fudge factor for me, just in case, I miss something. And then that way, if the thing comes back lower than expected, then that's just extra profit. So main point of the show is you got to really dial these numbers in, and you really are not going to start getting good at this until you start doing deals and you start actually doing these rehabs and getting contractor estimates and going full cycle with these things. I mean, this sounds great to hear, but until you're actually out in the street doing this, your learning curve is really going to shorten. So, hopefully this podcast was a good rule of thumb for people. We actually gave like real numbers out on what stuff should cost, so you can go back and use this as a reference. So Jeremiah, man, always appreciate you coming on and contributing to the shows. So if people wanted to follow you and check you out online, maybe they got a house in Long Island they want to sell to you or whatever the case might be, how do they get in touch?
Social media, whether it's Instagram, Jeremiah J. Dalton _ or Facebook, those are the best ways to reach out to me.
Cool. And then your website is SuffolkCountyHouseBuyers.com if they want to sell a
Yep.
property. Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Thanks, pal.